topic of the presentation is the Apple Push Notification Service token authentication, which is pretty much a mouthful for something that's very simple. It's a very simple concept, but the term is actually rather complicated. So just to start with it, the Apple Push Notification Service, or here on it will be APNS, is just the service for push notifications on iOS. And one of the things with push notifications that I really love is that they add huge dimension to an application, to a feature that might otherwise be rather boring or rather simple. For example, if you have an application that's simple news application, reading news, stuff that interests you, that's a decent feature. But if for some reason that same application has push notifications that pushes notifications, about the topics you're interested as they're happening, that somehow becomes a really great feature. So push notifications are really cool unless you abuse them. But that's not the topic here, so we'll skip that part completely. However, with how they used to be set up, they're quite a pain in the ass to set up and sometimes to work with. So regarding issues with APNS, I have two major gripes with APNS. First one is that the certificates are a pain in the ass to handle, especially for non-experienced iOS developers, and especially for API developers who have never seen anything regarding mobile development. And my second gripe is that debugging push notifications is also a pain in the ass. It's something that sometimes reminds me of two people yelling at each other from two distant towers. Did you see this? No. Try again, and so on. However, with the introduction of iOS 10 SDK, there's also been this minor feature that's a huge quality of life improvement for me, and that's that instead of certificates, we have a new way to authenticate with the APNS, and that's the token authentication. So let's start first with certificates. How certificates work. Step one, you add push notification entitlements to your application. That's a pretty basic step. You just click a few things, make a few provisioning profiles, and so on and so on. Step two, you use to make new development and production. Luckily, there's a universal certificate right now for push notifications, and you send it to whomever is developing the API. This is usually supposed to be the simplest step. You just make a file, send it to someone else. But I've seen this step fail too many times to actually call it simple. And the final step is pray, because once you actually send the certificate, everything's out of your hands, and you're hoping that the API developer, who's usually not somebody in-house, knows what to do with it. And here I have a small excerpt that's based on a real-time communication on a project that's going to stay anonymous, but this is something that's how it really went. So the client asked, the API developer sends me an email, and he asks that the client wants us to implement the push notifications. So he wants some of my help. And I say, oh, fine, whatever. So I do all of those steps. And I send him the certificate attached. And I tell him that this is what you need to send the push notifications. And tell him to contact me if he needs anything else. But usually I hope that he doesn't contact me anymore. This one's more of a pro forma, don't talk to me, please. And this is how it ended. which is fine. Although, although the first thing that comes to mind is read the fucking manual, This is a pretty much a sane response from any other developer. I just send him a certificate. What the fuck does he do with the certificate? So the drawbacks to actually using certificates, that they call for a lot of back and forth communication, especially if the developer has never had any prior experience with push notifications. You might need time to set it up, and usually it's up on you to help him set it up, even though you might not be knowing what's his preferred way. Maybe he wants some library, maybe the API is in, I don't know, .NET, maybe it's a Ruby API, whatever. I usually don't care, but at this point you have to start caring because you need to help the guy to push it. Also, one of the major drawbacks of certificates is that they expire. This is my biggest gripe with certificates, especially since they have a tendency to expire silently. Usually you'll know that the certificate is expired because one of your clients, one of your users or your clients, is complaining that push notifications are not working anymore. And although it's usually the API's fault, this one is somehow up on you. So actually, to rectify these issues, we have something that's called token authentication, and I really love this feature. I think they undersold this one when actually they presented it, which also has the same step one. You add the push notification entitlements in your app, yada, yada, yada. And the second step is different. Now, instead of actually generating a certificate, you generate a key, a private key for the developer to use, which will be used to generate for encryption and to generate the tokens for authentication with the APNS API. This key is something that you'll provide to the developer. Step 3 is still pray, but at this point you're actually doing something that the API developer should be familiar with. You know, I'm not sending him anything that's he's unfamiliar. It's just a bit more straightforward process from now on. So just for a quick overview, to the developer who's developing the API, you pass the key and the team ID. He'll be needing these two informations to construct the JSON payload for the push notification. And everything else is being used with the JSON Web Token standard. The fact that this is a standard that's not developed by Apple is actually a big plus here, because it's something that I can argue that the API developer should be familiar with. And if not, I can provide him with the necessary documentation, and even better, this standard has a list of open source libraries supported by it. So it's like a major improvement over just doing something that's more apply, if that's even a term. So in a nutshell, the APNS becomes just a basic API that you communicate with. You just shoot your push notifications to the APNS, and after that, APNS forwards them to your devices. One of the more things that you should probably just keep in mind as an application developer, if the API developer does not know this, that the tokens and all of the JSON payload needs to be encrypted. And although it seems that a lot of encryption algorithms are supported, they're not. Only this one supported, the ES256. I haven't looked into details about this one, but it looks rather pretty straightforward. There are also two API endpoints you're shooting for the development and the production, obviously, and you use the same key for both of these endpoints, which is pretty good. And you can also change the port if for some reason you have issues with ports, which usually I thought ports wouldn't be an issue, but in some of the applications they have. So the improvement here actually is in one of those, my two major gripes, is that the debugging becomes easier. I haven't used this in production yet. I'm hoping to use it like as soon as possible, because it seems like a huge improvement. And because you're actually communicating with an API, you're going to get a rather simple, you're going to get a response that's familiar to the API developer, or an error with a sane response. So also, although the tokens used for authentication expire, the keys don't to generate those tokens, and you can use the key that you generated pretty much for the lifetime of the application. But if you need it, you can revoke it. Like certificates, you can revoke it, and it will not be able to use. And the major improvement here is that this way you use less Apple stuff, so less like proprietary technology, and you use more something that the web developer should be familiar with. The JSON Web Token standard, and something they've been working with one way or another for a long time. And even though it might be their first time, it should be something that they've seen in one form or another. So it's an improvement that way. For further reading, there's actually not much left here. There's the WWDC talk that I used mostly to construct this presentation over here. There's a very nice Indian guy talking about it, very cute accent. And this is the second link is probably all of the documentation you'll be needing, and probably the link you'll be sending to the API developer as well. And that's it. If I've known this would be so short, I'd probably think about maybe increasing this in something else. But I was kind of hoping there would be code examples, but unfortunately not. Even better that they are not, because this is something that you can start using immediately, and it requires no changes in your application directly. It requires some changes in how the API talks to the APNS. If there are any questions, please shoot forward, but I think this is a really simple concept, so no questions. Perfect. Your time.